Welcome back, everybody. My name is Taylor Martin. This is the best Damn EDC, and today I wanted to mix it up a little bit, not sit at the table, but also just a change of speed in terms of what I talk to you guys about. This has been something that has been on my mind for a while, maybe a year or two, but EDC pet peeves. I love this industry. I love the gear. I love so many things, the community and everything, but there are definitely some things that grind my gears, and that's what this is all about. So these are my 10 EDC pet peeves. And with that said, let's do the damn thing. So the very first item on the list for me is, and probably will always be, keys. I do have a solution that works for me. It's this one. It's worked for me for a long time. This is the JRW Tough Clip. I use some sort of really small shackle. This is the Key Smart Mini. And then I have just a couple of other things like a tritium vial and a little pry tool. But I still hate keys. I hate having to carry them. I hate having to use them. And I especially hate car fobs. The AT4 that I got rid of earlier this year was the least egregious of car fobs because I could just keep that in my pocket and never touch it. But now I've switched to the Excursion, and it's got a fob and a key. And I hate it so much, but I just hate keys in general. I do have a solution that works for me. It's the least bad solution that I've come across in many, many years, but I still hate them. And it's just keys in general. It's always going to be on my list of pet peeves. I hate keys. The second item on my list is gimmicks. I hate gimmicks, and there are some things that are novelty without being gimmicks. What I mean by gimmicks are things that unnecessarily have like 20 functions, like a tool card. There are some that are actually pretty handy. I like them, but most of them have functions you're never ever gonna use. Not everything needs to have 9 functions. Not everything needs a bottle opener, and not everything needs a 1/4-inch hex bit driver, because let's be real, the 1/4-inch driver is now the bottle opener of the EDC world. Like, it's thrown on everything just because you can. You see a lot of this with like unnecessary functions on Kickstarters and these new novel items that in reality, if they were just one simple tool that actually did the job very well, it would be a very cool item. But then they throw on 9 or 10 other functions and it's just kind of useless. A very recent thing, it's not really a new product, but something I've talked about fairly recently, was a carabiner in one of my recent unusual EDC videos. It was a carabiner that was very cool in its own right, but it had a built-in knife and a tiny storage compartment that's not really useful for anything, and all sorts of stuff like this. And here's another example, a perfect example. This one comes from Olight. It's a carabiner that has a slip joint knife built into it, and I cannot think of a reason I would carry this and use this knife over just having a dedicated knife in my pocket. That's just one of those things where you needlessly throw 1,800 tools into something that would just serve better to have 1 or 2 functions. Number 3 is less about the gear and more about the people. This one is knife scalpers and flippers. And I'll be honest, I've bought knives that are gonna be a limited release just to see if I'm gonna like it. But I kind of pay that tax, right? I don't sell it for more than I bought it for. I don't try to take someone for their money. I bought a limited edition Guardian Tactical at Blade Show 2019. They only made 10 of them, and I sold it for less than what I got it for, which was the show floor price, which was less than MSRP. So I didn't flip it. I tried it out and ended up not using it or carrying it ever, so I sold it. And I've done that with many knives, and I just consider that the tax for trying things out. But people who buy things explicitly just because they know that they're gonna be scarce and that they can flip them for a profit, it really irks me. On the bright side, in my community where I do have a classifieds in the Discord server, we don't really have that problem. That gets stamped out pretty quickly by the people in the server. It's not explicitly against the rules to price something high. I mean, if you can sell something for the price, the market value kind of changes up and down all the time. Pricing can sometimes be subjective and changes by the day, but for the most part, I would say that there's not a whole lot of price gouging that goes on in these limited drops, which are becoming more and more increasingly common in the EDC world. So I don't care for price gouging and scalpers, flippers. I'm really happy that my community kind of stamps them out. Number 4 is also less about the gear itself and the ebbs and flows of the community and how fast things move. And in fact, the constant, never-ending chase to get the latest and greatest is sort of what drove me out of tech. I just got tired of getting used to something, and then it just, you know, going the way of the dodo. People don't like it anymore. There's something new just around the corner, and it just kind of wore on me, and I got tired of it. I wouldn't say I'm there with EDC, but I will say that the rate at which new knives come out now is exhausting. I cannot keep up with the likes of Kaiser and Civivi and We Knife and many of these companies that just churn. There's new products coming almost every single month, sometimes multiple times a month. I can't keep up with it. But more than that, what really kind of drives me crazy is how the community just takes on this one thing. For example, the chamois. Everybody wanted one before the production came out. It was just the pinnacle knife. Like, everybody wanted a chamois. They came out with a production version of the chamois, and they were hot. And I finally got my hands on one, and then it seemed like nobody cared about them anymore. I personally don't care if other people care about the knife. I enjoy the knife. I still have it in my collection. I still carry it. I like that knife. But seeing how fast people move on from that to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, that's exhausting. And it's especially bad in certain parts of my Discord server. There are people who are like, Timascus is really dumb, like, that's really stupid. And then you come back like a month later and everybody wants Timascus everything. It's just this flip-flop back and forth, never-ending chase. I never really know what's hot at any given time, but it's always interesting for me to come kind of take the temperature and see where things have changed in just like a month's time. How many things have just passed by, what nobody ever talks about anymore, and what's new and hot at the time, and watching that also just kind of fade away. I'm not a huge fan of very short product cycles. I like to see something stick around for a long time, and that also may be why I like Chris Reeve and Hinderer Knives so much, is because they found things that work and they stick to them and don't change a lot. And I know that's boring for a lot of you, but for somebody who for the last 10, 12 years has constantly had new things, it sounds great, and it is fun. I like trying new stuff, but I also just like going back to what I know more often than not. So short product cycles and the ebbs and flows and the never-ending chase for new gear does get very old. Okay, now we're going to talk more about more specifics when it comes to things like knives. And the number one thing that just drives me crazy, and this is also true for flashlights especially, really cheap and lazy pocket clips. A pocket clip is, I think, one of the more important parts of a knife. It affects how you carry the knife, how you grab the knife out of your pocket, whether that knife is going to stay there or not, and whether it's going to grab onto other things as you walk by. The importance of a good pocket clip should not be understated, but it's just something that I feel like a lot of knife makers consider as an afterthought, and that bothers me, and especially with flashlights. This flashlight right here is a JC Custom Hydra. This has been in my pocket every day since I bought it. It's been a few months now. I've bent this pocket clip out several times. So it's not necessarily the design of this pocket clip I don't like, it's the strength of it is just not great. I've not really even caught it on much, and it just tends to bend out, and yeah, it's not ruined the flashlight for me, but I am definitely in search of an aftermarket clip for this light. And it does use kind of that universal custom flashlight clip mount, so I can find one for it, but I would rather just buy the flashlight and the clip be good from the start, especially for something that's $350 or $325. I'd rather have a good clip on it from the start, but instead I've got to spend more money to get a better clip on it. And when it comes to knives, one of my favorite knives to carry, and one of my favorite pickups this year is the McNeese Mac 2. I don't like the clip on it. I love the knife. I don't care for the clip. So if I could find a better aftermarket clip for that, if that clip, for example, were milled, I would probably like it a whole lot more. But it's this probably water jet or laser cut, thin titanium clip that's barely bent. It's just not appealing. On a knife that looks so good, the clip is just, it feels like an afterthought. So fortunately, the next one, number 6, is something that we don't see nearly as much anymore. Now, there are some cases like proprietary hardware, but what bugs me more than proprietary hardware is variety hardware. And one of the worst offenders of that is Hinderer. I said earlier, I like Hinderer knives, I really do. But this knife right here has a flat head. It's kind of a proprietary because the reverse side is slotted, but a flat head for the pivot, your body screws are hex, and then your clip hardware is Phillips. Why? This is a $500 knife, and it just feels like they were like, well, we have these screws, let's just use these now, you know, but that's not the case because Hinder's been making this knife for a long time. Why not change? Why not just make them all hex or all Torx or hell, even all Phillips? I wouldn't care. The fact that I need a specific tool for the pivot, a different tool for the body screws, and then a different tool for the clip is just ludicrous to me. And Shirogorov, right? I was talking about proprietary hardware. It doesn't bother me as much, but it still sucks. I can get this knife apart without buying their however many $100 tool. I think it's like a $200 or $300 tool just to take the knife apart. Archie from Nice Guy Machine Company actually told me that a nickel fits perfectly in the pivot and then a dime fits in the body screws. I couldn't fit in this one because the smaller sized Shirogorovs are a little too small to fit a dime in there, but on the larger ones apparently you can. I ended up finding the right size screwdriver to get this apart and a nickel for the pivot screw. But yeah, it's just one of those things, like, I want to be able to service my knife, take it apart. I've said it many times, taking a knife apart is just something that's very cathartic for me. I enjoy doing it. So having the ability to do that easily is something that matters to me. And when companies make it a little more difficult by having either proprietary tools or a proprietary tool and just several different types of hardware, it's awful. Different types of Torx screws isn't so bad, but man, when you can have a knife that everything is a T8 on it, like it's just perfect. That's what every knife should be. Not T8, but just all one screw type. So the next one is more of a design choice. And I'm not an expert. I'm not a designer. I don't know if maybe there is a good reason to do this, but not putting a sharpening choil on your knife. Why? Why wouldn't you do that? So I love this knife. This is the Spartan Harsey 4-inch. I don't know, it's a huge knife. There's no sharpening choil. What they've done is bring this edge all the way to the plunge line. And because of that, you actually can't sharpen the last little bit of edge. An example of a knife that's very, very similar. I was just talking about it. Spartan Harsey XM18. This one has a finger choil, but it still has a choil and you can sharpen all the way up to the edge of the blade. This one, you will never be able to do that. Here is another example. CKF 520, edge ends before the plunge line. You have a sharpening choil. You can sharpen that full edge. It's something that every knife should have. It's not that difficult. Just end the edge before the plunge line. It's very, very simple. Number 8 is more about fit and finish and quality control, but the thing that bothers me most, especially more than just a knife being off center, that bothers me. It just kills me. But what bothers me more than that is when you get a knife that is perfectly centered and there's still blade play. Like pivot tightened down all the way, action's perfect, and there's still a little bit of blade play. Drives me crazy because there's really not much you could do about that other than like buying your own washers and adding them to the mix. It kills me. It absolutely does. I have 2 paramilitary 2s and both of them perfectly centered, perfect action. Pivots are all the way tightened down and there's just the tiniest hint of blade play. Man, that one gets me. It definitely gets me. But the other one that I would say is related to that is we'll call it loose detent when the knife is closed and the blade has just a little bit of play when the knife should be closed. When done properly, the knife should close and that detent ball should rest in the hole and that blade should be closed and not have any play. But when there's play on the action like that, when the knife is closed, kills me. The next one on the list, number 9, is knockoffs. I hate knockoffs. I hate people who are ripping off designs. And there are homages and then there are knockoffs. People talk about nobody owning the rights to, say, the Barlow pattern for traditional knives. That's true. It's old. It's as old as time. But when you're talking about something that is a very clear ripoff, like the Land, whatever model number it is, the Sarin Mu, that is a very clear Chris Reeve knockoff or ripoff design, that kills me. I hate it. There's really no justification for it. You're putting money in the pockets of people who are stealing from someone who put in the work to make the product originally, right? And you could argue, many people have, that it's not really taking money out of the pockets of, say, Chris Reeve or whoever is getting ripped off or the design stolen from, but I disagree with that wholeheartedly because it's devaluing the work that they did in creating something that's so iconic, right? The Sebenza is super iconic, but you can go get something on Amazon for $20 that looks the same. It's not the same. It's made out of cheaper materials. The fit and finish is nowhere near the same. It's not the same thing. And people who try to justify that buying this will help them, decide if they want to spend that money, that's not the same either. You're not getting that feel for the knife. It's something totally different. There is, in my opinion, no justification for it. In the watch world, there are total rip-offs like Invicta and Pagani Design and Steinhardt does some. Like, there are true total rip-offs that are trying to be something else. Even though they say Pagani Design or whatever, they're very much just blatantly copying Rolex. And then there are things that are homages to older things that are not made anymore. I'm okay with homages. I'm not okay with knockoffs. So that one's a little more gray for me. Watches, it's a much more trickier path to navigate. But in knives, it's very, very clear. There's, in my opinion, way more variance in design and way more possibilities in design when it comes to knives. And when you're just blatantly copying a design or ripping somebody off, I'm not cool with it. And then the last one, the 10th thing that just absolutely kills me is gatekeeping. I get accused of it, but I'm not gatekeeping anybody. People are like, your videos are only for, high-end knives and stuff. I do budget videos. I love doing budget videos, and I welcome everybody into this community. You're never going to hear me critique anything about what you're carrying unless it's some total knockoff of something. I might mention it, but I'm not here to make people feel bad. I'm here to educate and show people what's out there. But when I go into my community, in my Discord or the Facebook group, and people are harassing people for carrying a Benchmade knife or an Olight or any gear for that matter, it drives me crazy. It hurts the community and it gives us all a bad rap. I don't like it, and it's not something that I want present in the EDC community at all. It's something you can avoid, but when somebody is making someone else feel bad because their budget doesn't match what they deem great or worthy of their dollars, nobody wins from that conversation. Everybody leaves feeling worse, except for maybe the douchebag that made everybody else feel bad, right? Like, I just don't like it. I don't stand for it, and I don't allow it in my communities. There's a perfect example. I hate to even say his name, but I feel like it should be said. We had a guy in the Discord server. He went by Volaire, and anybody who came into the watch channel looking for some advice on a watch, they would say, hey, give me a suggestion for a watch between $50 and $150. And every time he'd be like, you need to buy a Tudor Black Bay. Okay, let me just drop $3,000 to $5,000 on a Tudor. It wasn't helpful to anybody. And whenever they countered with like, hey, I can't afford that, his suggestion was just don't be poor. People like that, one, he was a kid and just completely disconnected from reality, but people like that don't bring anything to a community, and they only make everyone else seem unapproachable. When I come into my Discord server and I see conversations like that happening, I hate it. It makes me feel bad, and I have access to pretty much everything, right? All the knives I could ever want, all the watches I could ever want. I'm not here to make anybody feel bad, and I hate it when other people do. So I don't stand for it. I don't like to see it anywhere in my comments, Discord, Facebook, anywhere. I hate it. Gatekeeping is something that's unavoidable, but we should all stand up against it. So that's it. Those are my 10 pet peeves. I'm sure there are more. Maybe I'll do one specifically on knives and design and features at some point. I've got a lot of gripes and stuff that I can complain about. So let me know what you'd like to hear about in the future, right? Knives or whatever else it may be. And what are your biggest pet peeves? Let me know about those in the comments down below. That's it for now. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, carry on.